children we deal with have all been permanently excluded from their mainstream schools all over Caulderdale, usually for emotional and behavioural difficulties. But some of them come to us with specific learning difficulties as well, that have previously been undiagnosed for whatever reason. The children would have had episodes of violent behaviour and disruptive behaviour, usually over quite a long period of time, usually a cumulative violence towards other pupils, violence towards staff, self-harm, abusive language, and just really failing to engage in the learning process and also stopping other children from engaging in the learning process.
The children referred to us still belong to their mainstream school and they don't spend a whole week with us. They're children who might be at risk of exclusion, but who we expect to be able to change their behaviours and get them back into class successfully.
I'm a children's book author, an educator, and storyteller from Alaska, Southeast Alaska. And I started teaching something I call performance literacy about 16 years ago, and where I teach kids how to write and tell their own stories. I found myself working primarily with high needs at-risk populations of students. I like it. I like the challenge, and I can relate to them.
Because when I grew up, when my parents would give us both ice creams, I'd get my ice cream and I'd go, and I'd be done with it. But my sister, she could make an ice cream last a week. She'd go like this, she'd go. And I'd say, hey, Eve, let me have a bite of your ice cream, just one bite. And she'd go, no, you already had yours. And I'd say, come on, Eve, just give me one bite. You got that whole thing. No, you already had yours. Come on, Eve. Dad, quit trying to take my ice cream. My dad'd say, boy, you leave your sister alone or I'll give you a whooping. I'm like, okay, okay. Man, I just wanted some ice cream.
I'll work in classes with teachers so that they'll be able to own this process themselves. So in order to own it, you have to tell a story. And you have to tell a story that's interesting. And you have to tell it well. A lot of people don't think they can tell stories well, but they can.
I saw this little boy walking down the street and he's going, ba-da-beep-beep, ba-da-doo-doo, ba-dee-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And I thought, I'm sitting that little boy. He thinks he can sing. I can sound just like him. I'm the Raven. I can sound even better than him. So I went, ba-da-ba-ba-doo-doo, ba-da-doo-doo-day. The boy stopped and looked at me and he went, ba-da-doo-doo-doo-doo. And I went, ba-da-doo-doo-doo. And I didn't sound as good as him, but each time I tried, I sounded more and more like him until finally I went, ba-da-ba-ba-doo-doo-day. I sounded just like that boy. Because that's what I was. I was the boy. And I was standing in the middle of the street. And I was looking up at a raven on a street lamp, and the raven was trying to sound just like me.
Beforehand, you plan for the children who aren't going to cope with it, who you'll have to take out, who'll have to do, and yet that doesn't happen as much as we might predict. He has a very quiet manner, and they listen, and they take on board what's happening, and somehow he carries them along with what he wants them to do. And it's a very positive approach, a very can-do atmosphere that he creates.
I do something with my face. Do you know what that's called when you do stuff with your face? I use... Expression. Expression. Why do you think I use sound and movement and expression when I tell a story?
You have to use sound, you have to use facial expressions, and you have to use body movement. And when you do that, it addresses all the learning styles of everyone in your audience, whether they're an audio or whether they're visual or a kinesthetic learner. You'll touch them all. So I'll tell a story, and then I'll ask them, what did I do to make this a good storytelling? And the kids will tell me. They'll say, and sometimes I have to guide them a little bit, but they end up saying you use sound and use expression and movement. And I write that on the board, and they see that. And then I ask, why is this important? And they'll say it's interesting. They'll say because you can visualize the story. They'll say if you don't, it's boring. So right off the bat, they're kind of feeling like they're owning some of this because they've told me this is what they saw. Then I show them the visual portrait of the story.
Who thought there was a different problem in Raven Day? What do you think the problem was?
That you were trying to sound like another raven, but you couldn't, and then you did.
Okay, and that was the solution.
And I'll have one of them come up and model that for the class. And I choose a kid to model it who I think is probably a kid who's, no matter what group I'm in, one of the least successful in that group. First of all, so that individual knows that they can do this. And also for the other kids there who feel like maybe I don't know if I can do this, when they see this kid who they know is not a very successful kid be successful, they go, oh well, if Billy can do this, I can do this too.
Now if you notice here, I didn't even have to tell him what letters to put the other. I said put a B here for beginning, then he put a P for problem, an S for solution, and an E for end. Lee, I want you to pick an animal to write about. It could be any one of those animals, or it could be a different one. Scorpion? Why don't you write that right up here, scorpion. If you need some help, let me know, I'll help you write it. S?
I will brainstorm from them what the subject is that they're going to be writing their stories about. I often choose animals because every kid knows about animals. So I know I'm dealing with background knowledge that they already have.
He chose a scorpion to write about. Now he's going to choose a problem for that scorpion to have. Now Lee, it can be any of these problems or it could be a different one. Hunted, chased, trapped, it could be bad wind, it could be a winter, it could be something else, whatever you want. Okay, so you put that right where the problem is, trapped.
I've come to understand that he's been classified as hyperattention deficit disorder, ADHD. He's also autistic. He also has a very hard time dealing with anything that he deems authoritative. I think they call it authoritative defiant or something along those lines. And there's a couple other classifications I was told he has. So the teachers were very happy that, first of all, he engaged in the process, but second, that when I asked him to come up and model the creation of a visual portrait of a story, he did that in front of his classmates.
Now then, there's going to be a solution to his story, where that scorpion gets trapped. It might escape, it break out, it might gnaw its leg off. What do you want to happen to your scorpion in your story? It breaks out? Okay, write that right there, please. I don't know what kind of trap it gets trapped in. And I don't know how it breaks out either. He's gonna figure that out. Okay? What's that? Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be that too. It could be trapped in a pit and it could dig out. That's right.
So the kids will brainstorm different subjects, and then they will brainstorm problems and solutions that have to do with those subjects. So they've done all this. I haven't told them, this is what we're going to write, this is what you're going to write about, this is the subject you have to write about. And no, they know that they've come up with this. So by the time they start writing, they have an ownership of it, and they know they can do it.
Now, why was the shark chasing the fish? Okay, so write something there that says hungry, so we know that he was hungry. That helps with the beginning.
These children are quite often afraid to put their thoughts to paper, and although they might be happy to tell you a story, to make stories up, to work on the computers, etc., and feel fairly confident with that, the moment you ask them to record things on paper, one or two of them do have dyslexic tendencies, and they will clam up at that, and quite often that's when they will kick off in mainstream. They'll make a diversion because they feel it's better for their peers to see them as being a disruptive troublemaker, a hard man, rather than somebody that can't get their thoughts onto paper and do the reading and writing.
I'm going to teach you something that's called telling
and retelling a story. That's me telling and then you retelling. And then you'll tell me your story and I'll tell it back to you. Okay? Once there was a hungry crow. He was looking for some food, but there wasn't any food. The only thing he saw was a garbage can.
And he tried opening the lid, and he couldn't open the lid, so he saw the bear. He flew over to the bear and said, there's some food over there. Come on, there's some food over there. And the bear said, where?
When a kid tells their story for the first time, and another kid's listening, and that kid knows, I have to tell this back. So they really focus on listening in ways that don't normally happen in school. When the other kid tells it back, they'll use different vocabulary and different sentence structure. So the kid who originally wrote the story hears their story back to them, but they don't hear it exactly the same way. And just like when someone writes a story and an editor gives them suggestions on making it a better story, these are basically verbal editings that they're getting back, that they can choose to or choose not to incorporate in their story. And often they do. Usually they do. So they'll be using different vocabulary and different sentence structure. And they begin to speak in story talk and book talk. And this isn't something that they normally do. They don't get that at home. Almost all of these kids, in certain populations, 100% of the kids don't. They don't talk it on the playground, and they just don't hear that talk. And when they get a book and start to read a book, they don't always understand why the words are put together that way. It doesn't make sense to them, because they don't talk that way, and nobody in their life talks that way. But now they're starting to talk that way, so they understand that better.
There was a little boy and a man, and a tiger came along. And he ate the little boy. So the tiger went away.
A little tiger, bullied, and that big tiger's son.
Big tiger. I'm doing the actions, you do the story. We'll do it slightly different, shall we?
No! I can't work it with you.
No, you can. So keep going.
They're doing everything they can within their power to make this a successful experience for the kids, and we'll see that happen 2 days from now. We will see at the end of 4 days working with these kids, things happen that the staff will feel very good, that they've been a part of it. They're real professionals, and I appreciate the work that they're doing. They're making my job easier. I don't always get people that professional. I've got them this time.
You know, these are children who typically you would expect to have to change an activity in 10, 15 minutes. It's short bursts is what you would expect from them. And yet they'll work at this for an hour and a half.
There's a little boy walking down the road. He heard a noise behind him. He was very, very scared. He turned around and looked, and it was nothing but the wind. Okay, what did I do to make that a good storytelling? You tell me movement or expression or sound that I did to make it a good storytelling. Hands raised. Okay? Yes. The way I said wind. Okay. Then they have to face the class and they will say, what did I do to make this a good storytelling? And when they use that language, they're admitting to themselves that they did a good storytelling. Whether they really feel that way or not initially, that's what they're saying. And then their classmates raise their hand and they start telling them specific things that they did that made it a good storytelling. Then they'll say, what could I do to make it even better? And I chose those words very carefully. Make it even better. Again, they're saying, I did it good, I'm making it even better. What can I do to make it even better now? And they get that feedback, and they will incorporate that. They'll incorporate those changes, and they feel safe in doing so. Another thing that's happening, though, of course, is they're learning to trust their classmates.
He thought he could jump over the point when they circled him
but he fell into a ditch and snapped his neck. What could I do to make it even better, Jordan?
When you said snapped his neck, you could have gone.
This is something that often doesn't happen, and kids are afraid to put themselves out, put their work out, open themselves up for critique, be it with writing or with storytelling. But when it's done this way, they feel safe in doing it. And they're hearing positive things from their classmates, and then they're sitting down and they're giving positive critiquing to their classmates and encouraging critiquing. They're saying specific things that made a storytelling good, and they're giving specific suggestions on how to make it better. Real important ways to interact as human beings.
And if I was inside, they'd blame me still. People would go up to him and say, Jack did that, or Jack did that. And I'd be inside, or I might be playing football.
Well, when I were at nursery, one of my teachers said that I couldn't read and I couldn't write, so when I stopped reading, I stopped writing. And then it's been tricky because I haven't been reading or writing when I've been off school. Because I was off school and then I come here. And it took me ages to get back into the routine of writing and reading.
Not good. Because you'd get bullied and all sorts outside it.
A lot of things are target driven now, and schools, teachers in primary schools are under a lot of pressure